Now you've already seen some comments in the code, so this is going to be a really quick video, but I just wanted to show you how to explain comments a bit better and another type of comment you can add. So now I'm looking at the first script from the last exercise where I gave you the assignment. This can be any code, I'm just using this for example, but you see for start and update, it already has a comment here, and I mentioned before that anything after these two slashes, this code will not actually run. This is just a comment for the user to read so that you can understand the code a bit better and what's going to happen here. So for example here, it says start is called before the first frame update. That doesn't do anything in Unity or C#. That's just there so you know what start does. You can add comments in your code anywhere with the two slashes like this. So we could say stores the total value that we will calculate. So anytime two slashes are added in C# like this, that means anything after them on this line is going to be a comment. And this doesn't have to be at the start of the line. So if we look here, we have this line where it's creating a variable and assigning 0. I could go on this same line and add a comment right after it. So I could say this is the total variable. Notice when it's green, this means it's a comment. This code will not run. So it's kind of a preference. You could put a comment before something, you could put a comment after. Everybody kind of develops their own system of how they like to comment. And the purpose of this is just to be clear with what's going on. So there's no real set way you have to use comments, and technically you don't need comments, but this is very handy when you're working on a project and you come back months later, or if somebody else has to take over your project. Adding comments to complicated sections of code or just explaining what's going to happen will really help with that. You would think because it's your code, you're going to understand it when you come back to it, but trust me, you will not. When it's been a long time and you come back to a complex program, you're going to spend a bunch of time trying to figure out what you did before, when some simple comments probably would have saved all that hassle. So you can get in the practice of using them where you feel they are needed. Say something like, if this for loop was a bit complicated and you weren't sure what's going on, add a comment. So, put something here, creating a for loop to calculate the total of all i's, or whatever you want to put in there. So that's one type of comment. Now there's another one I don't believe you've seen yet, but another one you can use. Instead of two slashes, you can type a slash and then a star. And notice here, it put all the code after green as a comment. So what happens here is, using a slash star like this, everything after this is going to be a comment until you add another slash star. So you open it with slash star and then you end it with star slash. So now anything I put in between here, this is all a comment. And this can go on for as many lines as you want. So we could have, a multi-line comment like this. And where this comes in handy is when you have to write something long explaining, or at the beginning of a script, if you want to put a big description of what the script's going to do, you want to put who created it, the date, all these different things. That's where you can use this type of comment. So as we're progressing through this course, feel free to comment anything you feel you want to have a comment on. I'm going to try to use comments quite a bit as well, just to help out when you're starting out. There's probably going to be a lot of comments on stuff you normally wouldn't need to comment. I'm just doing that for practice for you, so you get in the habit of doing it. But if you feel like you should add different comments, add whatever comments you feel fit. Okay, so I'm just going to delete the rest of this. And now I'm actually just going to delete this scripts object, and I'm going to delete our first script because we won't be needing that one anymore. Now, just before we start downloading assets and importing them in to start creating our game, I want to show you one more feature of Unity that's very handy. This isn't something that you have to use at all. It's completely optional. It is a very handy feature that I recommend though, and you're going to see why in a moment here. So you've probably noticed whenever I run my game in Unity, it looks a bit different than yours as my screen is green and yours is not going to be. This is what's called Playmode Tint. Now I'm going to show you the purpose of this. I'm just going to create a simple object here. I'm just going to create a sprite. So now I have this sprite in my game. And I've talked about this before, where when you run your game, if we make changes, so I'm just looking at the scene here, and if I start moving the position of my sprite here, so let's say we set it to about -35. Now I made that change while the game is running, which is not going to save. So if I hit play, notice my square goes all the way back here. Now this is intentional for Unity so that when you're running your game, you can play around with the settings and test things out, and nothing's going to destroy any settings in your game. So for the most part, it's a very handy feature that none of these settings save, but it's easy to forget that you're in play mode. It probably seems like something that's not going to happen to you, and you're going to say, you know, I won't forget that. You definitely will. It happens quite often. So like I said, this is optional though. Only try this if you want. But what you can do is add this Playmode Tint. And what it does is it changes the tint on your entire Unity editor. So this way you can't mistake when you're in play mode or not. So now if I start modifying an object in here, everything's green. So I instantly know I'm in play mode. These settings aren't going to save. So to enable Playmode Tint, you just want to go up to the Edit menu and go to Preferences. And then on here, we want to go to the tab that says Colors. And now this is where you can actually change many colors throughout your editor. So you can look into these on your own and play with them and make some changes, but all we're going to focus on here is Playmode Tint. So what I usually like doing is either using a bright green or a bright red. You can actually use any color, but I like one that's very obvious and very ugly. So I don't want to make something that's, you know, just going to be a slight tint or something that looks nice. If you do that, you might not notice it and forget. So if I do something like this red or a dark green, it's very obvious and you can't mistake it. I agree, it definitely looks ugly, so use this as your preference. You know, pick something that you like here and whatever works for you. So I'm just going to set it back to a green. I don't even care what kind of green, but this is noticeable enough. So now anytime my screen's green, I know if I make changes, they're not going to save. Okay, so that's it for this video. I will see you in the next one.